Well, poor Peter, he's up one minute, down the next. One day he's the rock, and then he's Satan. Actually, it wasn't a day, it was, the same kind of thing. But I think it's important, as I was thinking about this, to just even understand maybe who all the major players are, to get into this passage a little bit more deeply. So God, of course, created everything, and God created everything to be good. And part of God's order of creation are the angels, these beings that don't have a body like we do, but they have intellect and they have will. So from the moment of their creation, part of what makes angels different is that they have what's called infused knowledge. So everything that they were ever going to know, like at their creation, was just sort of like downloaded into them. So angels, they can't learn anything. Everything they're ever going to know, they just sort of knew from their creation. But they also have will. They have a free will to follow God, to follow God's plan, to be dependent on God, or to not. And so even though God created the angels, just like he created everything to be good, based on their knowledge and their ability to make a choice, we know that the devil and then all of his followers did not want to go along with God's plan. Of course, a part of God's plan that they knew was God's great love for humanity, that humanity is the one made in the image and likeness of God, and that in God's love for humanity, he was going to come, send his son, be incarnate of the Virgin Mary, and die and rise for us. Of course, that would put us ahead of the angels. And so the devil and all his bad angels just didn't like that plan. So they went against it and rebelled. It even says in the book of wisdom in the Old Testament that because of the devil's envy, like death entered the world. And so then the devil and all his bad angels, because misery loves company, when they separated themselves from God, they're just trying to take everyone else along with them. Of course, Jesus was the one, of course, who was going to come and bring about our ultimate salvation, our ultimate opportunity for life, including to live with God forever in heaven, which is why God made each and every one of us. So again, the devil is envious and he's hateful that we, poor human beings, actually have the opportunity and the potential to have what they rejected, life forever with God. After the fall and just humanity's just being kind of a mess, Jesus had to come and reconcile it all in himself. To finally go to death, to put death to death on the cross, and to rise from it so that we can rise from it. But again, the devil is the enemy. He's the accuser, he's the tempter, he's the seducer, he's the father of lies to try to trip us up. That's what the word Satan means. It's like, as Jesus says, it's like an obstacle, like a stumbling block, like a pothole or a speed bump or something that's just meant to trip us up. Because they know the plan, and they don't like the plan for us. It's interesting that throughout the Gospels, every time Jesus encounters these demons, they know exactly who he is. People around him don't always know. Even his disciples didn't exactly know who Jesus was. The demons know exactly because of their knowledge. We know who you are, Jesus of Nazareth. You've come to destroy us. Then there's that big moment before Jesus' public ministry, that temptation in the desert for 40 days, which we hear about the first Sunday of Lent, where the enemy is trying to get Jesus to not fulfill his purpose of his saving passion, death, and resurrection. So he's like, you know what? You know the story. You know what? If you just throw yourself off this big tower, the angels are going to catch you. It'll be amazing. People will be super impressed, and you'll be good to go. And here's all the kingdoms of the world, and I'll just give them all to you if you just follow me. So you can have all the glory and power in the whole world without that whole messy cross business. You don't have to do that. Of course, Jesus wasn't going to be tripped up from God's plan, the Father's plan for him, for us, for our good. So, when Jesus starts to finally lay out the plan for his disciples, where he says that he has to suffer greatly and be killed, and on the third day be raised, and Peter says, "No, you don't have to go through that." He's like, whoa. He's like being an obstacle, kind of a stumbling block. And he gets it, of course. He knows that Peter's thinking just with a different mindset. When he declared Jesus to be the Christ, the Son of the living God, he was thinking with the mind of God, but as Jesus says, he's now thinking with the mind of humanity. And it makes sense. Like, Peter loved Jesus, and we don't want to see bad things happen to our loved ones. He also did know that Jesus was the Messiah, the one who was coming to bring deliverance to God's people, but just didn't really know what exactly that meant. So there's good reasons for him to not want Jesus to have to go through that. But it was a stumbling block. And things I've been reading this week, when Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," it's not like so much angrily, but actually like sad and like heartbroken. Is that the one he just sort of made his number two guy, he's saying the same things that the enemy does. But he says, "Get behind me," like be a follower again. The devil can't be a disciple. He made that choice. It could just never happen. So at the temptation of Jesus in the desert, he says, "Be gone, Satan." But here to Peter, he says, "Be gone behind me. Be a disciple again and follow in my way." And he says, what does that mean? Those who wish to come after me must deny themselves, take up their cross. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. On the human level, that doesn't really sound really attractive, does it? But St. Paul says in our second readings that we shouldn't be conformed to the mindset of this world, but be transformed by a renewal of our mind, that we may know God's will, what is good and pleasing and perfect. Of course, God's will is to bring us into his life, into the very life of Christ as the body of Christ. Sometimes maybe we think that following Jesus means that we're just supposed to be nice people. There's nothing bad about being a nice person, I guess. We all like nice people. But to be bold, I think to follow Jesus isn't to be nice. To follow Jesus is, in a sense, to die. To die to ourselves in order to live for God and for others. And there's a lot of things that we sort of have to put to death in order to follow along this way. Because Jesus shows us that the only way to life is sort of through the cross, this cross that brings life. So we might have to die to our comfort or to our ease. We might have to die to our selfishness. We may have to die to just a vice that we're hanging on to that just keeps us from our relationship with God and others. We might have to die to an identity that doesn't speak to who we really are, whether it's the lies that we hear or we tell ourselves, like, I'm no good, or whether it's being too caught up in things like our achievements or our talents, which are great, but not ultimately who we are. So our ultimate identity is a beloved daughter or son of God. This Canaanite woman that we heard about a couple weeks ago, she had to, in a sense, die to being a Canaanite, just her whole culture, her whole history, her whole kind of sense, in order to be part of the new house of Israel that Jesus was coming to bring. And she even had to suffer that difficult conversation with the Lord. But she knew that Jesus was the only one who was going to bring life and salvation, so she was all in on that. We know that if we come after the Lord, it can be difficult in trying to discern and follow his will and his purpose for us in our life. We heard that in our first reading from Jeremiah, who, as he was trying to proclaim God's message to people, just came under so much attack from everybody they didn't want to hear it. But he couldn't help but just want to do what God had in store for him, even though it was difficult. In a sense, he He followed after the Lord. He denied himself, took up his cross, and followed. So for us to follow in the way of self-giving love, that self-giving love that God is, that self-giving love in whose image and likeness you and I were made, then we put ourselves aside when we die to ourselves for the good of others. We actually don't lose our life. We find the fullness of that life for which we were made. As we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, let us know that the Lord invites us into a holy communion with his self-giving love so that we can imitate what he does, and knowing his presence in our lives, have the strength to do it. Knowing that it is in the Lord alone that we find our life, and that we continue to rise to the more that the Lord has in store for us.